Alright guys, MTech Guy here, and today we're going to take a look at changing out the coolant on the little E87 1 series. Now I've not long ago bought this car and I've got no idea what condition the coolant is in. I've got no idea what type of coolant's in there or even what colour it is, so today we're going to look at getting it changed out. Okay, so why should you look at changing out your coolant? Well, it's used obviously as a coolant in the summertime as it's more effective at cooling your engine than water alone. It functions as an antifreeze in the wintertime. It has corrosion inhibitors to avoid rust and corrosion within your engine, heater matrix, etc. It has lubricating properties which makes the operation of things like your water pump more efficient. Now, over time, due to the many heat cycles and pressure differences the coolant goes through, it loses its potency and effectiveness, essentially breaking down over time. So it's a good idea to refresh it when the time comes to maintain the effectiveness and the efficiency of the coolant. So how often should you change it? Every 4 years is fine, but doing it any sooner doesn't hurt either. Depending on use, I would say anywhere between 2 to 4 years as required. Alright, so what coolant should you use? There's lots of different coolants on the market nowadays. Some are suitable for use in BMWs, but certainly not all. The best way to approach it is to use BMW coolant, which has been manufactured specifically for use in BMWs, and best of all, it's not expensive either. Pretty much on par with any other coolant you're likely to buy at any automotive store, so there's no excuse not to use the BMW stuff. Okay, so let's take a look at what we're going to need. Okay, so of course you're going to need some coolant. I've got 4.5 litres here, and then some distilled water to mix it with. I've got 5 litres here, so I've got more than enough to fulfill the capacity required. Now this is BMW coolant. It comes neat as a concentrate, so you want to be mixing it with the distilled water, 50-50 ratio. Now the capacity of the cooling system in these cars is approximately 8.2 litres. Give or take, it varies slightly between automatic and manual cars. Alright, so let's run through the steps required to change out your coolant on your BMW 1 Series E87 130i with the N52 engine. So first off, we need to get the front end of the car up in the air. Okay, so now that we've got the front end of the car up in the air, next up we need to remove this plastic under tray here. This is held on by 17 screws and they take an 8mm socket. Right, so now that we've got the main plastic under tray out of the way, next up we're going to remove this secondary tray here at the front. And to remove this plastic under tray, there's just 2 bolts that take an 8mm socket. Alright, so now that we've got all the plastic under trays out of the way and we've got access to everything that we need to access, first up we're going to drain the radiator, and we're going to do that by removing this blue drain plug on the left hand side of the car here. Now you can either use a large flat blade screwdriver or a number 4 Phillips to get that out of there, and of course we're going to drain the old coolant into a drain pan here. And to make sure we get that radiator fully drained off, we're going to remove the cap off the expansion tank, and that'll just let a bit of air in the top. Get that draining a bit better. Yes, it looks like we've got the green coolant in here, not the blue BMW stuff, so that's interesting, but we'll get that changed out for the proper stuff anyhow. So now that I've got the radiator completely drained, I've reinstalled the blue plastic drain plug there. So next up we need to drain the block of the engine. Now unfortunately the N52 engine doesn't come with a dedicated drain block, unlike the M54 engines. So to be able to drain the coolant out of the block of the engine, we need to remove the lower radiator hose, which is here where it joins to the plastic thermostat. It's just up there, so it is a bit tight up there, there's not much access. Now this hose, where it joins the thermostat, it isn't held on by a Jubilee clip, unlike some of the other hoses where it joins the water pump. So to be able to remove this hose, we need to undo this clip arrangement that's holding it, and to do that we need to slide a small flat blade screwdriver up the top there, a little pocket screwdriver, and there's a little notch in the top of the clip on the top of the hose connector. We just need to clip that up, pop it up, and then that'll enable us to slide that hose off there. It might be well stuck on there if it's been on there for a while, so you might just need a flat blade screwdriver just to start it off, just to ease it off. Of course, don't go mad because it's plastic, we don't want to break anything. So we're going to put a screwdriver in there, pop the clip up, and then we're going to remove that hose, and then the last of the coolant, which remains in the block of the engine, is going to drain out there and it's going to make a big mess. Okay, so as you can see, I've got my small pocket screwdriver just positioned in the top side of this clip here, just where the notch is. You can't really see anything, so you're just going to have to insert this by feel. It is quite tight up there also. So now we've got the screwdriver in place, we're ready to pop the clip up out of the hose connector. There we go. Next up, we're ready to remove the hose connector off the thermostat. So there we go, we've got the hose removed from the thermostat, and that coolant's just draining out the block now via the thermostat. Alright, so now that that's pretty much finished doing its thing, we're ready to reconnect our lower radiator hose back onto the thermostat housing. So to do that, what we're going to do is pop that clip down in position before we refit it, which does seem a bit counterintuitive. So we've got that clip down, and then basically the hose just pushes back onto the hose connector there, and you'll hear the retainer click in position, and just make sure that you've got it pushed on all the way and it's nice and secure. There we go, heard that positive click. It's nice and secure. Sorted. Okay, so now that we've got everything buttoned up underneath the car, we're ready to refill the cooling system. So we want to be mixing that neat coolant with the distilled water 50-50 ratio. So what I normally do is take an old empty coolant bottle here. It's got the markings on the side. So I get my 50-50 there. You can use a measuring jug, whatever. This is the way I do it. So there we go, we've got a litre there of diluted coolant. So what I'll do next is pour this in the expansion tank and then just keep repeating the process until the coolant's at the correct level. So before we start refilling the cooling system, we need to remove this bleed plug here. And then what we're going to do is just keep pouring the coolant in there until we get a steady flow of coolant coming out of the bleed opening here. Refit the plug, and then we'll move on to the bleed procedure. There you go, so you can see we've got a steady stream coming out the bleed hole there. No more bubbles, so now we're ready to refit the bleed plug. Okay, so we've got the bleed plug refitted now, and you can see that this level indicator bobber is right out at the moment, and the coolant level is just at the bottom of the filler neck, so it is overfilled at the moment, but that's right where we want it, ready for the bleed procedure. So what we're going to do next is refit the cap back onto the expansion tank, and then we'll run through the bleed procedure. Alright, so to bleed the cooling system, first up we need to jump in the car, and what we're going to do is just push the key in ignition, and we're going to press the start button just to run the ignition. So it's on accessory mode, so we've not pressed the clutch in or the brake pedal to start the engine, so the engine's not running, we've just got it in accessory mode. And then we're going to put this fan speed on the first setting and increase the temperature to the highest setting on both sides. So what that'll do is that'll allow the coolant to flow through the heater matrix and bleed all the air completely out the system. And then once we've done that, we need to depress the accelerator pedal and hold it down for 10 seconds, and then that'll initiate the bleed procedure where it allows the electric water pump to run without the engine running. Alright, so if we come round to this side of the engine, you can hear that water pump running, and you can hear all that coolant moving, pushing the air out, doing its thing. So this is going to take a number of minutes to complete, so we're going to let that do its thing. Now if you've been running around in the car before you've done this procedure, it's likely that you've got plenty of charge in the battery. Now if the car's been sat for a while before you carry out this bleed procedure, it is worth hooking up a battery charger to the car just to make sure that voltage doesn't deplete out of your battery. Alright, so we'll wait for this to do its thing now. Okay, so now that I can hear that that's finished doing its thing, next up we're going to remove the expansion tank cap and just recheck that level. And that's just about spot on. So that's all good. We'll refit the cap. And then what I like to do, just while the front end of the car's up in the air, is start the engine and let it run, let it get up to temperature, let it build some pressure in that cooling system, and then we'll have a look underneath and just make sure that the areas of the engine that we've disrupted, that radiator drain plug, and that where the hose connects to the thermostat housing isn't leaking. Alright, so I've had the engine running for quite some time now, and it's up to temperature, and I know it's up to temperature because that lower hose is now warm, so I've got no fresh drops of coolant on the ground here, which is good. We'll just check that lower hose connection to the thermostat housing. No leaks, that's good. And the drain plug looks good also, so that's the 2 points that we've disrupted, so that's all good. So next up, we're ready to refit the 2 plastic under trays and then drop the car back down onto its wheels. Alright guys, so there we have it. That's how you go about changing your coolant on your E87 1 series. If you found the video interesting or useful, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. I'm MTech Guy. Thanks a lot for watching.